Well, let me add my words of welcome this morning. Colleen, here's your music right here. Just down right on the floor. Um, my words of welcome this morning. Glad to have you with us during these school holidays, and as we are continuing in the book of Nehemiah, and we are in chapter 6 this morning. So if you want to turn in your Bible to Nehemiah 6, I hope as you came in or last week you got the next reading list so you can follow along in our series, and we have those in the back and the table coming in as well. So we encourage you to. The Azalis are here. Hello, how did you sneak in? Stand up so we can say good morning to you. You've got to be freezing coming out of Bangkok, 35 degrees? You know what? I'm not going to wait till the end of service. Get up here. I just got to give you both a hug. Oh, bless you. Good morning. Okay, now I won't be distracted all morning. It's always good to see you guys come in. It's missionary day. We got the Youngs, we got the Azalis, so welcome. How long are you here for? This isn't a home assignment. This is just popping in and saying hi? For a month. Nice. Okay, they're here for a month. Who's going to have them over for dinner this week? Kathy Dawson, you got a sign-up sheet for them? Yep. See Kathy, she'll take care of it. So good to see you. I'm sorry, I get distracted a little bit too easily. Every once in a while, Sue will say, Tom, finish the story. Stop looking out the window. Finish the story. So anyway, so I hope you got the card and read along with us. Okay, picking up where I left off. And I see that Sky has been here this week, and our wall is coming along, and so that's beautiful, and we're going to get some new words on the signs over here, so those are coming along. So it's exciting to see as we are going through the book of Nehemiah, the building project in the book. We have our own building project going on here, and we're keeping the construction in the room for a reason, because this is what we're experiencing as we go through this book of Nehemiah. So Nehemiah 6, let's pick up the story. The U.S. presidential election of 1972 will go down in history as one of the greatest political scandals of modern times. It became known, I realize this is a dangerous place to go as an American, sitting with a bunch of Aussies talking about American politics, but I'm going there, so this is just where we are this morning. It became known as Watergate because of the location where this had all taken place. The headquarters of the Democratic Party were broken into, secrets had been stolen, and it was all done to secure the re-election of President Richard Nixon. The irony of Watergate was that Nixon had had a very successful first term as a president. His foreign diplomacy is still considered by many to be utterly brilliant. He opened doors to relations with China. He was considered by many to be a brilliant statesman as well as a very, very shrewd politician. But Richard Nixon had a fatal flaw. It wasn't enough simply to win the election. By every account and all the polls and all the predictions, he certainly would have taken the election. But that wasn't good enough. It had to be spectacular. It had to be a landslide over his opponent. It wasn't enough simply to win the election. It had to be a spectacular win. And it was one of the largest in U.S. history. Strangely enough, though, Richard Nixon's downfall came at the very height of his political career. The crash was just as spectacular as the ascent. Had Nixon simply been content with doing his job as president, his place in history today would be very, very different. Nixon is certainly not alone in an experience like this, but his experience and looking back at the history of that reminds us of a very, very simple universal truth. And that is this, that we are never more vulnerable to attack than when we are at the pinnacle of victory. The point of completion of a project is often the time when we are most susceptible to temptation, most susceptible to a downfall. We find that the same principle all through Scripture. It was just after Elijah's great success at Mount Carmel, demonstrating God's power over the prophets of Baal, that he fled into the wilderness in despair and in depression. Jonah walked through the streets of Nineveh announcing God's judgment, and the people responded in a tremendous revival that broke out in the city. And how does Jonah respond to that? He goes outside the city angry, depressed, sits under a tree and just kind of mopes. David, a man after God's own heart, who had never known defeat, and his kingdom was strong, his kingdom was on the rise, yet in a moment he lets his guard down and his passions and his position get the best of him, and he commits adultery. And then to cover up the adultery, he has a man murdered so that the scandal can't be found out. What about Joseph? One of my favorite stories in the book of Genesis. He's sold into slavery by his brothers. He goes off to Egypt, and after a time, he experiences great success and is promoted to a very high position. Just when it seemed everything is going so well, a false accusation lands him in prison, and he loses that position. When are we most vulnerable to attack? Often when things are going so well. When we are at that point of completion of the project, when we have experienced a measure of success, it is at those moments when we are most tempted to let down our guard. I've got this. I can take care of it. It is at that point we face the twin factors of success and fatigue. And you put those two things together, and it is disastrous, potentially. And you know what? The enemy of our souls knows this all too well. This is, I believe, exactly where we find Nehemiah as we turn to Nehemiah chapter 6, in this kind of a place. And how will he respond as he is in that spot right here? Nehemiah 6, beginning at verse 1. Now when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had built the wall and that there was no breach left in it. Do you hear? They're just about to finish the project. although up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, "Come and let us meet together at Hecaperim in the plain of Ono." But they intended to do me harm. And I sent messengers to them, saying, "I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you?" And they sent to me 4 times in this way, and I answered them in the same manner. In the same way, Sanballat for the 5th time sent his servant to me with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, "It is reported among the nations," and Geshem also says it, "that you and the Jews intend to rebel. And that is why you're building the wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. And you have also set up prophets to proclaim concerning you in Jerusalem that there is a king in Judah. And now the king will hear of these reports. So now come and let us take counsel together." And then I sent to him, saying, "No such things as you have been done, for you're inventing them out of your own mind. For they all wanted to frighten us, thinking their hands will drop from the work and it will not be done. But now, O God, strengthen my hands." Now when I went into the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, son of Mehetabel, who was confined to his home, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God within the temple. Let us close the doors of the temple, for they're coming to kill you. They are coming to kill you by night." But I said, "Should such a man as I run away? And what man such as I could go into the temple and live? I will not go in." And I understood and saw that God had not sent him, but he had pronounced the prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this purpose he was hired, that I should be afraid and act in this way and sin, and so that they could give me a bad name in order to taunt me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, O my God, according to these things that they did, and also the prophetess Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who wanted to make me afraid. Here is Nehemiah at the very cusp of completing the project. And we see in verse 1 that there is no breach left in the wall, though the doors and the gates aren't yet set up. The wall is pretty well complete. They're nearly there. They're almost done. And just at that moment when things seem to be going so well, these old enemies rear their ugly heads once again. We've seen them a few times already, and each time we have seen them in the book of Nehemiah, their tactics change just a little bit. And here we find that they are more refined, more strategic than they have been before. Even more subtle. There are some subtleties in this story that are interesting to look at. And it reminds us that we must never forget that we have an enemy who studies us, who knows us. The enemy of our souls is shrewd, and he is strategic. He knows our strengths and he knows our weaknesses. If he can't come in through the front door, he will sneak in through the back door. If he can't use force, then he will use flattery. And he looks for an unguarded moment to bring us down. It is exactly what the enemy is trying to do here. In this passage, we can see that they appeal to Nehemiah in 3 very distinct ways. First, they use a subtle distraction to try and pull him away from the work. They issue an invitation to come and meet them out in an area that would be far away from the city. Let's get him out of the city. Let's get him distracted from the work. There's no real reason that is given for the meeting. There are no threats like there were before. But obviously, this would do two things. First, it would distract Nehemiah from the work on the wall. It would distract him from the project. It would get him away from the project, and it would slow down the progress that they're making. But second, very subtly, it would get him away from the people, where he would obviously be more vulnerable, far more in danger, to remove him from the city, remove him from other people. And that is the point when we are often most vulnerable, when we're alone, when we're defenseless, when we are without the support of others right alongside us. It's a biblical principle. We see it all over the place, this idea of living in community. Jesus sends the disciples out in teams, never alone. That is important here, and it would get Nehemiah away from other people where he would be so vulnerable. But we see that Nehemiah is not a person to be deterred. One consistent observation we make about Nehemiah is that he has the capacity to remain focused on the job at hand, to stay at it. He knows exactly what he has been called to do, and he doesn't turn his head to the left or to the right. He says, I can't leave this work. It's not done yet. I cannot just drop everything and go. I need to stay focused on what I'm here to do. And obviously, though, Nehemiah senses something isn't right in their request. He discerns, verse 2, that they intended to do me harm. He knows these people very well. Not only are they studying him, but he's studying them as well. And he knows them. He is aware of their tactics, and he can smell a rat a long way off. But they are persistent. In fact, we see here that they appeal to him 4 times, obviously attempting to wear him down. Let's just wear him down. We can just bring him down just one little piece at a time. It's something like a small child. Many of us have the experience of a small child who just keeps asking for something, and I can just wear mom down if I just keep asking, and I just keep asking and just keep asking, and finally the mom goes, "You want some lollies? Just take the whole bag. Just leave me alone. I can't take this anymore." And it's that kind of a thing. They just keep coming and coming, whatever. And he's ready to give in. Let's wear him down. It's that kind of persistence when we're already tired and worn down. That can be the tipping point, can't it? Just one more thing. And you go off. And you finally give in. Anything to just quiet the noise. Persistence is always aimed at our exhaustion. Persistence is always going to take advantage of that point of tiredness. It is a test of our spiritual fortitude. Can I just wear this person down? But not Nehemiah. Each time he answers them in the same manner as verse 3, I can't come. I refuse to stop the work. It would have been so easy to rationalize and just say, okay, we're nearly done. I'll just go and see what they want. Take a little break. No, he's well aware of the tactics of the enemy and their desire to do him harm, and he refuses to give in. So they employ a second tactic. They resort to deception, lies, rumor, gossip. If we can't lure him out with a nice invitation, let's appeal to his reputation, his character. We perhaps could even appeal to his pride. Their words are meant to intimidate him and to threaten him, but they use very subtle and even devious means to accomplish their work. Look at verses 6 and 7. They send him this note. It's reported among the nations, and Geshem also says it, that you and the Jews intend to rebel. That's why you're building this wall. And according to these reports, you wish to become their king. Notice some things about that. They're never actually reported who's. It's reported among the nations. They say that you're doing this. Notice those words. It's reported. At the end of verse 7, you don't want the king to hear about this, do you? It won't look good, Nehemiah. Let's talk about this together and see what we can do. We want to help you. We don't want to see your reputation damaged. We want to help stop these nasty rumors. So if you come out and talk with us, maybe we can work out a little plan here. Again, notice that there are such subtle tactics being used here. First is the invitation comes in the guise of concern. We're here to help you, Nehemiah. But it's nothing more really than manipulation. But notice their tactic is to use rumors and gossip to their advantage. They fall back on one of the most damaging tactics of the enemy. And here Nehemiah faces one of the challenges every leader faces. And that is the threat of false rumors, gossip, lies, innuendos. I don't know a single leader or a single pastor who has not faced such things. In his New Testament letter, James reminds us that the tongue is such a small organ, but it can destroy a person in a single moment. When I was in high school, I remember playing a game that we called telephone. I think it has other names in other places. But it's a very, very simple game. Everybody sits in a circle. You've probably played it here. Do they do this here in Australia? You sit in a circle. One person whispers a word or a phrase into the ear of the next person, and it goes all the way around the circle until the final person announces what that word or phrase is. And virtually without fail, the final word or phrase is dramatically different from the first word that was spoken when it started. You see, such is the damage a seemingly harmless piece of gossip can do. It's why God hates gossip. It's why he abhors a rumor. It always distorts the truth beyond recognition, and I have seen gossip damage a community, and it is often devastating what it can do. I have seen the damage that gossip can do to a person's character and destroy them forever. But these enemies fall into the trap of every gossip. They never cite their sources. Be very, very careful when somebody gives you a piece of information, and they never cite the source. And they completely exaggerate the truth. Again, Nehemiah can smell a rat, and he responds simply and tersely in verse 8, no such thing has ever been done. In fact, he names the source of the rumors. He says, you have invented these things out of your own minds. Literally, you have invented these things from your heart. It is always a matter of the heart. And their rumors and their gossip expose their hearts for what they truly are. They are deceitful, they are lying, they are vindictive, and but they are shrouded in this guise of helpfulness. I remember one time a woman came to my wife a number of years ago with a piece of helpful information that she thought my wife needed to know so that she could pray more intelligently. Isn't it interesting how gossip and rumors are often shrouded in prayer requests? Be careful about that. And it was all in the context of, we need to help this poor person, and your prayers would be much appreciated. And what she shared was nothing more than unfounded gossip about this other person. And it was meant to destroy this person's character. Well, this dear woman didn't know what she was messing with when she came to my wife. Those of you who know my wife. Sue looked her straight in the eye and she called it out for what it was. And she said, "You're a gossip. And I'm going to ask you to stop doing that." The woman insisted she was only trying to be helpful, but that's often how it is. Disguised as helpful concern, it can do irreparable damage to a person or a community. But Nehemiah could see through all of this. Verse 9, they were only trying to frighten us. And he once again entrusts all of this to God. Says, "God, give us strength. Don't be distracted. Keep going with the work." There's one more tactic we find here, beginning in verse 10, and that is the tactic of betrayal from within. These other two came from outside the group, but the third is betrayal from somebody within his own people. Nehemiah, verse 10, visits a friend who has a prophetic word for him, verse 12. And Nehemiah has every reason to feel safe with this person, this man of God. It isn't stated why he is shut up in his home, but that's where Nehemiah goes to visit him. What could seem more friendly? What could seem more safe than sitting with a man of God in his own home? Some commentators suggest that this man may have been hiding out as well because of the opposition. So Nehemiah could have felt a sense of companionship with him as they were facing something similar. And so this man, Shemaiah, proposes a plan that they go and lock themselves up in the temple and hide out in that place. And nobody would dare come looking for us there. We'll be safe in the house of God. Who would dare break into the temple and try and kill you? But the very suggestion Nehemiah knew was a clue that he couldn't ignore. He knew that the plan itself would defile the temple. That this was a plan completely opposed to God's law. It had absolutely no integrity in it whatsoever. On the surface, it may have seemed like a viable plan, but it was completely unreasonable. It was completely against the nature of God and the law of God. Nehemiah knew that the means would not justify the end of trying to save him. But more than that, it exposed the heart of his betrayer. Verse 13, Nehemiah knew that he had been hired to intimidate him and ultimately to destroy his reputation. He knew that the plan that they had devised would ultimately give him a bad name and was only designed to intimidate him. What we find in Shemaiah, he joins the ranks in scriptures of betrayers. The Judases who would do the work of the enemy simply for a bag of money. And again, Nehemiah could see through it. He saw it for what it was. So once again, Nehemiah entrusts all of this to God. We have seen that again and again with him, haven't we? Verse 14. And we realize it is a danger when we feel that we need to fight every battle ourselves. Nehemiah simply will not be drawn into it. The enemy appeals to his reputation. The enemy appeals to his success. The enemy even attempts to use his friends and allies to bring him down. In all of this, it's easy to simply look at Nehemiah and see how he's responding, but remember, the story of Nehemiah is how God is rebuilding his people. How is God present in this story? This is God's work. It's not just a story of Nehemiah's cleverness or insight. It is a story of God's protection in the midst of his work of rebuilding his people. We see that he gives Nehemiah endurance to persevere in the work, not to be distracted, but the ability to endure, the strength to endure this work. We see, secondly, that he gives Nehemiah discernment to see the lies. Discernment to see behind what is the real story that's being told here. But we also see that God gives Nehemiah the faith to trust that God will handle it. I can let this go because God has this. All of Nehemiah's ability to stand in this time of trial at the pinnacle of success is because God enables him, and he recognizes his vulnerability at this point. So he draws his strength from God's strength. He draws his wisdom from God's wisdom. He draws his faith from God's faith. Let's reflect on this together as we conclude this. I don't know where you are in this story. I don't know which of those challenges you're facing right now. But be reminded that God is with you in it. You are not alone. What do you need from God today? Perseverance? Discernment? Maybe your faith is running low and thin. What is it? Ask God for that. What is the particular trial that you are facing? Where are you in that? Remember, we have an enemy who is subtle. He knows how to get in. He knows our points of vulnerability. But we have a God who is greater. A God who is with us. A God who refuses to leave us or forsake us. A God who surrounds us. Ask him now for whatever it is you need as you face that battle.